All right, so it's a beautiful, calm day here in Montera, which is unusual. It's usually so windy here that I can't paint, but it's a really beautiful spot. So here's the scene I'm working with. I'm noticing a couple challenges right away. Number one, I'm gonna lose these shadows in the foreground. And then also, the color and value of the sand is about the same color and value as the distant cliffs. So I may need to alter the color of the cliffs to push them back, but we'll see. As usual, I'll be using the scene as inspiration. I'm gonna try to stay true to the scene, but I will be making some changes. I'm using a limited palette of cadmium yellow lemon, cadmium yellow medium, titanium white, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and some permanent red medium. That's from Rembrandt. And I'm painting on an 18 by 24 inch gessoed panel. All right, so I'm sketching with some burnt sienna, and I've just thinned the burnt sienna with odorless mineral spirits, mapping out the big shapes. And I've decided to make this distant bit of land here more visible. In real life, this land in the foreground kind of obscures much of this, and they kind of blend together. I've quickly sketched the shadow shape on the sand here, and I've altered it for compositional purposes. There's a bit of cliff right here. I sketched the top of the mountains twice, so I'll remove the other line here. And what I did was bumped the mountains up a little bit. At first, I put these mountains a little bit too low, and I want to make sure that I put them kind of high, have a horizon at about the 1/4 line from the top. The darkest portions of the scene are the shadows along the cliff here, and then also the rocks along this distant cliff. So I'll paint those in now. As you can see, I've already lost the shadows. All right, I've got a dark mixture here of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and a bit of alizarin crimson. This mix is sort of a dull purple color, but it looks nice in the finished painting to have a bit of this color popping through. I may adjust the color, but I'm not sure. Oftentimes colors out in the field seem too saturated, and then you get them indoors and they look just right. And that's what I found with this mix right here. Although today I have graded down a bit more than usual. All right, for the dark portion of the cliffs, I've made sort of a dark greenish mixture here, although I have dulled it down quite a bit with some permanent red medium. Most of the cliff is now in direct light, but I think I want to have this whole area dark because I don't want to draw the eye to the cliff. I want the eye to go out into the distance. I am squinting at the scene to reduce it to simple shapes. But the shapes are changing quickly, in particular the shadow shapes. So like I said, I'm using the scene for inspiration, but I'm making changes if necessary. All right, for the water, I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, titanium white, and a touch of burnt sienna. I'm also mixing in some of Gamblin's solvent-free fluid. When painting on panels, I like to add some medium to the mix to help the paint stick to the panel. It was gorgeous when I got here. It's still gorgeous, but some clouds have come in, and they came in so quickly. But I do remember what the scene looks like. I stood looking at the scene for about 15 minutes, thinking about how I was going to handle it. And I think I'll be able to remember well enough to finish the painting. Some painters do take photographs and then work from the photographs if the light changes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do like to paint from memory instead. I think that when I start working from a photograph, I paint differently. So I'd rather paint from memory and just take my chances with that. And usually it works out. All right, I like the shape of the water there. All right, for the sand, I've got a mixture of cadmium yellow medium, some permanent red, medium, titanium white, and a bit of ultramarine blue. To me, the color of the sand here is one of the standout features of this beach. It's sort of a beautiful orange color. I think I've got the value too dark right now, but that's all right. I'd rather start off dark and then lighten it up, and I'll get some warmth in these initial strokes or in the initial block in. As far as the shadows go, what I'll do is mix a sort of purplish color into this color for my shadows. I don't want the shadows to be too dark. Another thing I'm paying attention to here is the relationship between the whitewater and the sand. The sand is usually quite a bit darker than the whitewater. All right, I made a purple mixture here using ultramarine blue and some alizarin crimson, and I'm gonna mix it into my sand color here, block in some of these shadows. As I mentioned, I don't want the shadows to be too dark. When they're photographed, they look really dark, but in real life, you can actually see some warmth and detail in the shadows. If I make them too dark, oftentimes they just look lifeless and pasted on. And there's some shadows up here as well. So there's some greenery on the distant mountains. So I got a mixture of ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow medium, and some burnt sienna. And there's some exposed areas on these cliffs where there's sort of a reddish color, sort of like the sand color, maybe a little bit lighter in value and slightly less saturated. Although in person, it looks pretty saturated to me, but I will dull down the saturation in order to push this bit of land back. And Highway 1 is cut into the face of this mountain. And there's some bits of ice plant coming down. Actually, there's more red in this. I'll be adjusting that later. There's also a bit of that ice plant over here. Kind of comes down like this, and then some over here as well. For the cliffs, I'm starting off with a cooler sand color. So I added some ultramarine blue and a bit more alizarin crimson to the mix. And I'm not really happy with this color, but it is just a starting point. I'm mostly focusing on composition at this point, values, and trying to have an interesting arrangement of shapes and values. Once the whole painting is scrubbed in, then I'll come back and I will be more accurate with the colors. But for now, I'm just trying to arrange the shapes in such a way that I have a pleasing composition. I forgot this spot right here. Need to fill that in. And I decided to kind of chop off the top of this mountain here. I think I made it a little bit too steep or pointy. All right, for this rock or a bit of land here, I added some more titanium white and some ultramarine blue to the mix in order to cool down the color so that I hopefully push this bit of land into the distance and get some separation from the headlands in the foreground. There's also like a rock that goes like this. I'm usually hesitant to paint scenes like this where it's just sort of a beautiful vista, but at the same time, this is a spot that I love to look at. I've been looking at it and wanting to paint it for a long time, but I often feel that these sort of compositions aren't that interesting. They don't make that great of a painting. At least in the past, I haven't had success with them, but it's nice to keep trying. All right, for this distant land, I've got a dull purple And I mixed it using ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, titanium white, and a little bit of burnt sienna to gray it down. All right, where the wet sand meets the dry sand, there's sort of a purplish color. The wet sand is reflecting bits of the sky. So I've got a purplish color I mixed using ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and titanium white. And I don't mind that I'm dragging some of the sand color into this purplish color. There's also some cerulean reflected in the wet sand from the sky, but I'm just starting out with this purple color. Again, looking for an interesting shape here. All right, now I'm using my paper towel to scratch out some white water. I also want to put a breaking wave right here, and then maybe another one like this. Something like that. Where the water gets shallow, right by the breaking waves, there's quite a bit of green in the water, so I'm adding some bits of green before I put the white water in. It's mostly just behind the breaking waves or white water. I also added a breaking wave right here. For the sky, I'm starting with a mixture of titanium white and phthalo blue. And this mixture will get lighter as it gets closer to the horizon. Paying attention to value relationships here. The sky is about the same value as the light portion of these cliffs, but I won't be able to make accurate adjustments until I've got the whole panel covered. And while I'm scrubbing in, I'm thinking ahead to how I'm going to finish this painting, you know, what my approach will be. And what I mean is like what size brush I'll be using, what sort of brush strokes. I think I'm going to need to keep the brush strokes somewhat small because there are a lot of small shapes. All right, so I'm going to start reinforcing the sky right away here using thicker paint. I am not thinning this paint at all. I don't want too much texture in the sky because when you have texture, the texture moves forward in the picture plane, and obviously I want the sky to recede and feel airy and open. So I will keep the texture to a minimum, but I would like to get some thicker paint on the sky. Thicker paint often means more saturation. Out at the horizon here, there's sort of a dark ultramarine stripe or band right along the shoreline, this distant shoreline here. And I think I might need to lighten the value of these mountains. So I'm using a number 4 filbert to lighten these distant mountains. And the mixture is titanium white and ultramarine blue. I want to leave little bits of the original color showing through if possible. My panel is in the full sun, which is not ideal, but I have gotten used to painting like this, so I think it'll be all right. It's actually better for filming. You guys can see better what I'm doing. All right, so here's what I finished up with. This painting took about 2.5 hours to complete. It was finished on site. I started off by scrubbing in big shapes using a natural bristle flat number 8. And then for some of the smaller shapes, I did scrub in using a number 4 natural bristle filbert. After the scrub in was completed, I switched over to the number 4 natural bristle filbert exclusively, and I used that for the rest of the painting. So after the blocking was done, I basically built up the painting using thicker brush strokes, and I was attempting to have more accurate colors and values with that thicker paint. As I mentioned, I had doubts about this composition, but I'm actually pleased with the way it came out. I feel like there's a convincing feeling of light, and I actually like the colors. I think it's been helpful using a limited palette. It's been good for maintaining color harmony, but I still have a lot of room for saturation with the colors that I'm using. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. Check it out. There's also a link to Studio Gallery down below in case you're interested in purchasing one of my paintings. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.